Hey all, welcome back. Today I wanted to do a tutorial on how you can write test cases or unit tests for a custom Node-RED node. Now this node can be something that you developed on your own or something you found on GitHub. It's an open source node and maybe you want to write some test cases around it. So I found a lot of videos on YouTube regarding how you can create a custom node, but not how you can actually write test cases for that custom node. So I'll just be going through the steps that you need to start writing test cases for your Node-RED nodes. All right, so let's get started. So I have this custom node called Chunkify. It essentially takes a start time, stop time, and a split interval, and there's an aggregation interval as well. So it takes a query, which is in this query template, and it'll split this query based on the split interval. So let's say if you are asking for data for last 24 hours, and our split interval is 1 hour. So this is in milliseconds. It's 1 hour. So what this node essentially does is it'll split this query and give us small chunks of 1 hour. It'll split this query so that each query has a start and stop range of 1 hour. And then there's a feedback loop that kind of tells it that first query has been processed. So give me the second one, third one, and fourth one, and so on and so forth. So that's essentially our node. And I won't be going into details how I build this node because today we are mostly talking about how you can write the test cases around this node. All right, so to do that, let me jump to our editor. So first thing you'll need is you need to set up your environment. So to set up the environment, you would need Mocha, Chai, and the Node-RED node test helper, which has been provided by Node-RED to test Node-RED nodes. Now you can install all of these. You can install them in your custom node, and we are installing Mocha, Chai, and Node-RED node test helper. I've already installed all of these, so I don't really need to do that, but this is how you set up your environment. So the next thing you'll need is a folder called test, like the one I have here. And then you'll need to have a JavaScript file, which is the test file, which you can, so I've named mine as chunkify_spec.js. So chunkify.js is the node that we have built, and chunkify.spec.js is essentially something that holds all my test cases. So I'll go through one of the tests. So hopefully this kind of gives you some idea of how you can start writing simple test cases for custom Node-RED nodes. All right, so first of all, we'll import all the requirements. So we need Chai, we need Node-RED test helper, and I'm importing Chunkify as well, which is the name of the node, the custom node that we have built, and we're assigning it to time query Chunkify node variable so that we can use it throughout the test cases. Main key concepts are helper.start and stop. This essentially starts and stops the Node-RED server for isolation and essentially clean testing. And then this is a helper.node load function, which loads your custom Node-RED node into the Node-RED test environment and uses using a test flow. And then there are a few assertion libraries which are around here. We can get to that in a second. And then another thing to note is n1.receive. This is basically this simulates an input message to the node. So like my trigger here, I'm sending a message to my Chunkify. So if I do n1.receive, this simulates that I'm sending this payload to my time query Chunkify node because you have loaded that node using the helper. And the n2.on here is it captures and validates the output. So if I push this input on my Chunkify node, then the output that comes out of it will be in this n2 helper. So let's look at a very basic test case here. Well, let's look at this test case. So Our test case 2 is essentially if the range, if our start and stop is equal to the split interval or is less than the split interval, then it'll be a single interval. What that means that it won't split the query into multiple chunks because the start and stop range is smaller than our split range. So how we define this is first we'll make a mock flow. So this is our flow. The ID is N1, type is Chunkify, name, whatever you want to call it, and how many wires there are that are coming out of it. Because we only care about the first wire, even though the Chunkify node has 3 outputs, but we only want to check what's in output 1. So we use N2 as one of the helpers. So if you want to monitor, let's say, the second output as well, you can define it or initialize it like this. So this will be N3 and it'll become a helper, output helper. And then we use helper.load to load our Chunkify node. We assign some variables to our nodes. In this test scenario, we're only concerned about the N1, our input node, and N2, our first output node. So that's why we have defined variables for only those two. But if you want to check N3 as well, you can do that like this. Now, as I mentioned earlier, if you use n1.receive, it simulates an input message to the node. So what this does is this is a payload, or this is the data that's being sent to our Chunkify node in this test. So we are sending a start, stop, split, rate, and our query. So this is the input that the node or our test node receives. And on the output, we expect the output that start and stop should be equal to the start and stop that was passed, because the split range is essentially less than the start and stop time range. Actually, in this case, the start and stop is equal to the split range. If you take the difference of start and stop, it'll exactly be 1 hour, which is the split range in milliseconds. And once we run this test case, it should expect that our t start and our t stop is equal to whatever the input was. And if this fails, then we'll get an error. So to run the test case, you can just do npm test. Now this will go through all my test cases. So you can see I have 4 test cases and all of them passed. Now here, if I decrease my split range to, let's say, this number, and if I run my test case again, this essentially will fail this test, and this test will fail because now the split range is less than our time range. So now it's actually splitting the query into chunks. So that's why we're getting an error here. And we're back. This is a very simple test to check, let's say, one of the custom nodes, and then you can test different scenarios, validate different inputs and output for different conditions, including edge cases and whatever you can think of. You can also test with invalid inputs and ensure errors are handled correctly. And then you can also add this to your CI/CD pipeline so that you can continuously validate your custom Node-RED node before you push it out or publish it anywhere. I think that's about it. Yeah, let me know if you have any questions. Feel free to comment below, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.